Joe Biden.
Thank you. Hello, folks. Good to be back in Iowa. How are you? With so many good friends. It's great to be with you all. It's great to be here with Tom and Ruth and all of you. And let me start by saying to Jimmy Maurer, Jim, Bo, my son Bo, sends his love, support, and affection. And Bo and Jim served in Iraq for a year. And what you continue to do, what you did for our administration, old buddy, and taking care of vets and their families won't be forgotten. And I look forward to coming over and visiting you in your office, man. And folks, I know the mayor will find this as a shock, but it's amazing when you come to speak at the steak fry, a whole lot of people seem to take notice. I don't know why the hell that is. You've attracted the entire National Press Corps here. And I just don't, I've never quite understood it, but I'm learning. Look, folks, when the mayor was talking about Tom, he mentioned St. Thomas More, and he was talking about how he didn't realize Tommy More was, we Catholics refer to it as the patron saint of lawyers and judges and public officials. And, I don't want to turn this into a mutual admiration society. You know Tom as well as I do. But I know Tom and Ruth really very well. And when he made that reference, it reminded me of there's a play about that period when Thomas More was taking on Henry VIII and refusing to change the law so that he could get married, remarried, divorce his wife and remarried. And there was a famous scene in that play, A Man for All Seasons, where his son-in-law was a fellow named Roper. And Roper came over, it turns out, at the urging of the king's men to try to get More to compromise and overlook the law. And there's a famous exchange, and it reminds me, and it will remind you, of Tom. He said, in responding to Roper, he said, Roper, and if I cut down all the laws in England to do that, what will you do when the devil turns round on you then, Roper? All the laws being flat. These are God's laws, not man's. And he went on to point out, you have to stand sometimes, in spite of inordinate pressure. That's what I've watched Tom do. And I mean this, it's not hyperbole. You've seen it too. I've served with a lot of great women and men in my career in the Senate, but none with a conscience, none with a North Star, none with more certitude about why he ran for office in the first place than Tom. And let me tell you, Tom's work is obvious. Everybody knows about his work with Americans with Disabilities, the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the thing that people don't realize, and Tom and Ruth and I were talking about it on the way over, because I said it earlier. First of all, few men or women ever get to see the fruits of their labor, especially when, in fact, that labor was in the face of overwhelming opposition. Overwhelming opposition. Tom took on the business community. Tom took on the opposite party. Tom took on everyone. But not only did Tom change the lives, literally, of millions and millions of Americans with disabilities, in the same way with his IDEA program in schools that educate children to the degree to which they're educable. Not only did he change, but here's what he did. He did something remarkable. We don't think of it. He changed all of America. He turned able people into either not looking at the disabled at all, or looking at them with nothing but sympathy and pity. Having them look at them as equals. Having them look at them in a way to value all that they had to offer. Tom, you've not only changed the state of affairs for the disabled in America, you changed America's soul. Think how different it is from what it was 25 years ago. What people look for, abled or disabled, is to be treated with dignity, treated with respect. That's what Tom changed. I can't think of a handful of people, and I've served, as I've been told, it's supposed to make me feel good. It made me feel bad. Longer than all but 13 people in American history. I've served longer in the Senate. And so it's astounding. But Tom doesn't leave it to just what happened here at home. Think of what Tom has done and how loud his voice has been for those around the world, not only the disabled, but the persecuted. Not only the disabled, but the people who, in fact, have no voice. Tom has never been afraid to speak out. From the war in Vietnam to the death squads in Central America, to the outrages of everything from genital mutilation of young women in Africa to what's going on in Syria. Tom's voice has had a profound impact on how we view ourselves. And today, Tom remains the conscience of the Senate. Tom does not allow anyone the comfort in the Democratic caucus, and I mean this sincerely, the comfort of denial. Tom does not permit, because of his voice, the willing suspension of disbelief that so many of us would rather engage in, because darn, these problems are hard. To recognize them, to acknowledge them, places a burden on us. The good news is we have Tom for another full year. Another full year. And the good news, and I've gotten to know Bruce and Carolyn well. We've campaigned. I campaigned with him. He won in spite of me in 06, 08, and 10. I think I've been in every one of your campaigns. I've got to see him. I've got to see him up close and personal. And I've got to see the same thing that impressed his constituency. In 06, it wasn't a certain thing. But I watch people react to him, like you watch how people react to us when we speak, because you've been engaged in politics. You can feel it, you can taste it, right? Well, the thing I observed about how people responded is the same reason why Tom admires him and why I think he's going to be a great senator. He's absolutely authentic. There's not a phony bone in his body. I told Bruce I'd come campaign for him or against him, whichever would help him the most. Folks, look, when the president knew I was coming, he wanted me to, and I mean this sincerely, I spend 4 to 6 hours a day with him. We've become very close friends. I'm with him a lot. He's a hell of a man. And he wanted me to thank you. No, seriously. He knew I was coming, and he asked me whether I'd thank you. Thank you what you did for him personally, but also thank you for delivering Iowa for us in 2008 and again in 2012. Jill and Michelle and Barack and I, we would not be standing where we are were it not for all of you assembled in front of us today. You're the heart and soul of this party, and this has been a key to our ability to govern. From that day in August of 2008, when the ticket was announced, the President and I have had a laser focus on one thing: raising up the middle class. The middle class has been battered, as you all know, been battered not just in the 8 years that preceded us, but really the decline began much earlier. I don't know how many times I've walked a picket line. I don't know how many times I've been with you in your hometowns as factories were being padlocked and jobs were being sent overseas. And watching people who have had the ability to raise their family, the decent income, watch it all evaporate before them. So we concluded, and this, I'm not being absolutely literal with you. One thing I've learned, Mr. Mayor, no one ever doubts I mean what I say. The problem is I usually say all that I mean. But literally, and they kid me for using literally often, and I do. But folks, literally, the President and I had a handshake when he asked me to join him. I asked him only one question: was he committed, as he says he was, to rebuilding the middle class? And I also told him there's two things I would not do as Vice President. I wouldn't wear any funny hats, and I wouldn't change my brand. And I've kept my promise, but he's kept his. He's kept his. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you how we will measure the success or failure of our successive administration. It won't be whether or not the GDP continues to grow, and it is growing. It won't be whether or not the stock market has returned and exceeded its high, which it has. It will not be whether or not we create just any old job. The measure of our success, and this is absolutely the commitment we made to one another, the measure of the success of our administration will be whether or not the middle class is growing, and the things that allow it to grow and allow it to feel some security are able to be put in place again. Providing real economic security and peace of mind, creating real jobs, jobs you can raise a middle-class family on, jobs that are the jobs that have built this country. Unlike any other country in the world, we are uniquely a product of having the largest middle class in the world. For when the middle class does well, the wealthy do very well, and the poor have an opportunity. The President believes and has demonstrated that you grow the economy as we always have, from the middle out, not from the top down. And he's acted on that belief. The President of the United States and I, along with all of you, understand, you've heard me say it a number of times, and I'll keep saying it. Middle class is not a number. It's not $50,250 or $49,000. It is a value set. The middle class in America is about being able to own your own home, not rent it. Keep your farm, not have to sell it. About being able to live in a safe and decent neighborhood. To send your kid to a school that if they do well, they have a chance of being admitted to college. And if they get into college, like Barack, like me, like Michelle, like the mayor, like his brother, like Jill, Having an equal chance to get there, not based on your income, but based on the fact you earned it and you worked for it, and you have a chance. That's been the American story. It is brought home time and again by Joaquin and every succeeding generation, but is the story of the history of the progress of this country. It's about being able to be lucky enough to put a little money aside so maybe your children will not have to take care of you like you've had to take care of your elderly parents. It's all about the opportunity to be able to find a decent job because your government has fought on your behalf, not gotten in your way. My dad used to have an expression. We all have our stories, and I know so many of you personally. Your story is no different than mine, or quite frankly, in a fundamental way, no different than the mayor's. What's it all about? I'll never forget, everybody always ask me why. By the way, the president has made everyone in Delaware very upset because he talks about me as the guy from Scranton all the time. I am from Scranton, I'm proud of it. But I represented Delaware for 36 years. He makes me sound like I was a kid who climbed out of the coal mines with a lunch bucket in my hand. It wasn't that. My life wasn't a whole lot different than yours. But when my dad, after the war, in the early 50s, when there were no good jobs in Scranton, I remember my dad coming up and sitting down, and you've had this story, you've seen it. My dad's sitting on the edge of the bed in my grandpa's house where we were living and saying, Joe, Dad's going to move. I'll be gone for about a year. I'm moving down to Wilmington, Delaware with Uncle Frank. There's jobs down there, honey. And when I get a job and get us all set up, I'm going to come back. And I'll bring you and Mom and Val and Jimmy. It's only 157 miles, honey, and I'll be home most weekends. I remember thinking at the time, it's kind of lousy, but my dad was absolutely certain it was going to be okay, so we believed it was going to be okay. But from that moment on, as we were raised in Claymont, Delaware, and Wilmington, Delaware, every time we learn of somebody losing a job during a recession or losing a job for whatever reason, when the steel mill closed and shut down in Claymont, my dad used to say, and all my siblings can repeat it, they've heard it 100 times. He said, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to hold your head up. It's about being able to take care of your family. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what Barack set out to do is deal with all those things legitimately in the government's power that could make it possible, that enhances the ability to enhance the life of middle-class people. It was pretty straightforward stuff. What are the things that fundamentally affect the lives of the middle class, causing them to fall out of the middle class? Cost of health care. That's why the first thing he did, a remarkable accomplishment, something that Teddy Roosevelt started talking about but took Barack Obama to do. With the great help of Tom, and I'm not being solicited, it's for real, he passed the Affordable Care Act. So now, he decided instead of seeing all those factories padlocked, he wanted to see a lot more open. And the first thing he did was insist upon free trade, began to fight on behalf of American workers, began to say to our opposition, our competition, all right, we'll compete. We can beat you on any grounds as long as it's fair trade, but if it is not, we will intervene. And he has, more than any president of the United States of America. And in the process, he's generated $2.2 trillion in exports last year, creating good jobs in the process. Manufacturing jobs brought back to the United States of America, 500,000 of them, 500,000 since he took office. Investing in community colleges, because there are 600,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs in American high-tech industries for which there are not trained people. So in combination with major businesses, he invested $2 billion in community colleges, creating a conveyor belt from community colleges to decent-paying jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, over the objection of almost everyone, he rescued the automobile industry, putting his presidency on the line, saving 1 million jobs, and creating 300,000 new jobs since then. Energy cost, reducing the cost of energy for middle-class families, doubling those mileage standards of automobiles, which will save $1.7 trillion at the gas pump over the next 10 years, and over 12 billion barrels of imported oil. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now the world's leading producer of oil and natural gas, and we have a 100-year supply of natural gas. But at the same time, he's doubled renewable energy in this country and is committed to going further. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll not take the time, but college affordability. We've increased the number of Pell Grants, Mr. Mayor, by 3 million since we've taken office. Over 9 million middle-class families were able to keep their kids in college because of a $2,500 tax credit. We've increased the eligibility. Ladies and gentlemen, we've also made sure that that the interest rates in student loans will not double, and the student will never have to pay back more than 10% of his income after he graduates, so he'll be able to make it. Ladies and gentlemen, and in spite of our Republican friends, this is all done at the same time. We reduced taxes for the average middle-class family by $3,600. We've cut business taxes 18 times. We reduced the deficit that we inherited by 50% since 2008, the largest reduction in history since World War II. Ladies and gentlemen, this president and his leadership has reduced the national debt over the next 10 years by $2.5 trillion. And in the process, we've created 7.5 million new jobs. But folks, there's a lot more we have to do. A lot more we have to do. But there is not a single reason in the world we can't meet our objective of having the most educated population in the world, a higher percentage of college graduates than any nation in the world by 2020. There's not a single reason why we can't generate 100,000 new STEM teachers in the next 10 years, why we can't cut imports for oil in half by 2020, why we can't achieve energy independence, why we can't generate, as we promised, 1 million new manufacturing jobs in the next 4 years. And the list goes on. One of the things that I resent about the Republican Party is they continue almost like they want to talk down America's prospects. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on the verge of a fundamental change in this country. Like I said, a job is about dignity. It's all about dignity and the standard of living, and you need a decent job to be able to provide that. And by the way, it goes beyond a job. It goes beyond how we treat the people in our country. I know not a lot of you, but a lot of people criticize me for speaking out not long ago about gay marriage. I could not remain silent anymore. It's time we stop talking. It's the civil rights of our day. It's the issue of our day. It's the reason why the president believes we got to take 11 million people out of the shadows and give them the opportunity to earn their way to citizenship. Treat them with dignity. That's what strengthened this country all along. That's why the president eliminated DOMA, don't ask, don't tell. That's why he came out against this notion that somehow marriage cannot be recognized in one state and denied in another. Ladies and gentlemen, and when it comes to the rights of, the president's phrase, and I'll paraphrase it slightly, that everybody in America should have the dignity to choose who they love and marry who they choose. He believes that, but not just because it's a human right, because it's all about treating everyone with dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, look, when it comes to women, it's not just about choice and equal pay for Barack and me and for many of you. I am absolutely determined, the President is absolutely determined, that my daughter and my 4 granddaughters will have every single solitary opportunity my sons and my grandsons have, without any exception. None, zero, not a single solitary exception. It's about human dignity. It's about taking advantage of all that this country has to offer. Look, and the thing Barack and I have been saying for the last 4 years, the American people are way ahead of their leaders. You notice, when we announced our position on gay marriage, it wasn't a surprise. The American people agreed with us. When we announced our position in immigration, it wasn't a surprise. The American people agree with us. Our Republican colleagues have to figure out the American people are always ahead of their leadership. And it's time. It's time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always been the story, the history, the journey of this country that the American people have been ahead. And I know I've been criticized for saying this, but I'll say it again. That's what makes America exceptional. That's what makes us exceptional. In the area of foreign policy, the President and I were determined from the outset to reestablish that notion of a shining city on a hill, where we were once again the most respected nation in the world, where we once again looked to, not just for the example of our power, but for the power of our example. That's why. That's why the world has repaired to America for so long. We told you at this steak fry in 2007, at opposite ends of the platform, but he and I said the exact same thing, coincidentally. We said the first order of business, if either of us were elected, would be to end the war in Iraq. And we did. We ended the war in Iraq. The President gave me the responsibility of coordinating that effort to end the war. And the proudest moment as Vice President was standing in the Afwa Palace, a god-awful, gaudy palace of Saddam Hussein, before American troops and Iraqi troops, and having the great honor of dismissing American troops and saying, like every American troop before you, you're going home with nothing in hand but the certain knowledge that you did your job and you're coming home. Ladies and gentlemen, we promised you we would end the war in Afghanistan, and I guarantee you we will end the war in Afghanistan. Well, what Barack and I believe from the outset, everybody says, why do you guys, why has it gotten on? Why have you become such good friends? I have great respect for everyone with whom I ran in 2007. But if you go back and look at those 13 debates, the only 2 people that never disagreed on a single solitary subject in those debates were Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And the reason I tell you that is this. This has been seamless. It's been an honor, a great honor, to work for him, work under him, work with him. Because from the outset in foreign policy, he was determined, as I was, that the best way to defend our national interest was working in concert with the international community, not at odds with it. Obviously, every president will reserve the right to act alone if American interests are at stake. But we know, he knows, we are much stronger when we act in concert with our allies in the international community. And that's exactly how he has stepped up to deal with the atrocities of occurring in Syria. with the fundamental violation of human rights by the use of gas for the first time without the world responding since early on at the end of World War I. Others have used it, but he wasn't going to allow it to happen on his watch. And yesterday, as the President said, the use of chemical weapons anywhere in the world is an affront to human dignity and the threat to security of people everywhere. And let me note parenthetically that I think John Kerry has been one of the best Secretaries of State so far in the history of the United States of America. Because the President charged him. When the President went to the G8 after a long discussion that's happened before he got in the helicopter, he's the one who raised with Putin, why don't we jointly, why don't we jointly, since it's not in either of our interests to allow this largest stockpile in the world to go unattended, why don't we jointly move to the United Nations and jointly secure it and destroy it? A lot of cynics were of the view that Putin would not respond, but he did respond. Not because he's a good guy, because it's the naked self-interest of Russia to see these weapons not fall in anyone's hands. So as a consequence of the incredible work of John Kerry with his counterpart, the foreign minister of Russia, we're going to the United Nations with a resolution this week that will in fact call on the United Nations and the world to put pressure on Syria to have the confiscation and destruction of all those weapons. And ladies and gentlemen, as the President said, while we've made important progress, much work remains to be done. The United States will continue working with Russia, the United Nations, the United Kingdom, France, the United Nations, to ensure this process is verifiable and there are consequences should Assad regime not comply with the framework agreed to. Ladies and gentlemen, the President's vision is absolutely clear, is absolutely straightforward. He, in fact, is the reason why the world community is facing up finally, to this hideous prospect of the largest stockpile in the history, the largest stockpile in the world of chemical weapons being confiscated and destroyed. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a clear vision for America. It rests on a growing and prosperous middle class where the playing field is level, where the middle class has a fighting chance, and where, again, we lead the world by the power of our example, ending torture, ending the war, refusing to yield to the baser side of human nature. I'm absolutely convinced. I say to Tom, he and I came into politics about the same time. When I got elected as a 29-year-old kid, I was referred to as the young idealist. And if you notice, even to this day, even though I'm the old guy in the White House, whenever they talk about me as the White House optimist. I am an optimist. I'm more optimistic about America's chances today than I was when I arrived as a 29-year-old kid. There is not a single reason in the world why we will not lead the world in the 21st century. And the reason for that is really simple, folks. Whenever the American people have been given a half a chance, they have never, ever let their country down. And that's what my president's about, making sure the American people have an even chance. Ladies and gentlemen, as I told the president of China, who I know well, Mr. Xi, as I told Mr. Putin when I last had a conversation with him, it's never, ever been a good bet to bet against the American people. God bless you all. God bless our president. And may God protect our troops. Thank you.